All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another future focused weekly update where hopefully I'm doing my job of keeping you 10 steps ahead of the intersection of business technology and human experience. Thanks always for listening, watching, however you end up consuming it. And yeah, do me a favor if you haven't already, like, share, send this to somebody, tell somebody else about it, follow the Substack, all those good things that you're supposed to call to action for folks who listen to your stuff. But anyway, I really do this for you. So also, if there's things that you'd like to see different, change, please let me know. I can't promise I'll do it. I won't promise that, but I will promise I will give it thoughtful consideration. And chances are, unless you just got some wild feedback, I probably will make the change. So anyway, with that, I've got technically I've got 6 things. I'm probably only going to get to 4 today that I want to talk through, but really looking forward to digging into some of these. And like always, I ask that you would just hang in there because some of them might, be a little triggering. And I get the messages from folks who don't like when I give balanced perspectives to things. And I know it's a very divisive time right now. So let's get into one that is hopefully not going to spark any tension here for folks. But yesterday I came across this, or 2 days ago, something like that. It was this week. The EU Commission just came out with all of their guidelines for artificial intelligence, which one of the things I have been talking about at length is the fact that we are moving so fast. We really don't have any sort of guardrails. And the few guardrails we've had around artificial intelligence, we've pretty much thrown caution to the wind. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I remember doing an interview with somebody and we were talking about the fact there were 3 rules originally when artificial intelligence, before it really got legs, that tech leaders said, we will never do these things. No matter what happens with artificial intelligence, we will never do these things. And we broke all of those rules almost within the first year in 2022. So we don't have a great track record of this. And then on top of it, if you've been looking at the arms race, the AI arms race that's been going on between China and the US, we've done exactly the opposite of regulation. There was the repeal of the AI regulation, which I know there's a promise to, put something else in place, but there's really not a lot of motivation right now with some of the AI stuff going on to say, what we should do? We should slow down and think through the implications of this. So I was really encouraged when I saw that the EU put out some guidance for this, because the EU has been taking some heat. Everybody's kind of poking fun at them a little bit, like, wow, look how fast and furious China and the US are moving in the AI space, and Europe's lagging behind. And I think in many regards, it's for good reasons. Now, you could argue that maybe they're going a little too slow or they're taking too long. But I actually think the EU, I have mad respect for the fact that they seem to be one area that is not, they could go gangbusters in all this, and they're not. And I appreciate that. So anyway, you can go out to the website. If you actually look up commission guidelines, it's a pretty long document. It's a pretty huge document that breaks this whole thing down. Some good nighttime reading if you have trouble sleeping, I'll tell you that. But what I want to do is at least talk about this and then talk about why I think this is really important. Because if you go into it, really it focuses on some key areas. It's really focused on enhancing transparency and accountability around AI. So not only is it saying like, let's govern how it's done, but like, let's have greater transparency into it. And that's been one of my biggest concerns around AI is we really have no idea how this stuff is being built, what the parameters are, what restrictions are. We just know when it works and when it doesn't. And that's challenging, because then going back to the accountability, when something goes sideways, it's why we see some of the challenges around, well, whose fault is it? Well, I don't know. Is it the AI's? Well, maybe it is, but how would we know? Because we don't really know how it was built and what it was told. And did it actually violate what it was told, or did it do exactly what it was told? Well, we don't know because it's a black box. And this is really trying to focus on how do we make it more clear? How do we have disclosures to how the data is being used, how safety measures are being managed, and all of this other stuff. So it's setting out to at least say, no, we're not going to stop what you're doing, but there should be greater transparency into it, and there should be accountability for it when, I'm not going to say if, when it goes sideways, because it's always going to go sideways. And a large part of that transparency is making sure that there is consumer protection all along the way in both. And this is where you don't see a lot of this. It's looking at it both in the building of it and the delivery. And that's where you'll see debate, because people are like, well, we shouldn't govern how it's used. It's the fault of, and so you'll see this, there's this back and forth pointing of, no, it's the people who built it's fault if things go, no, it's the product, it's how they use it. And it goes back and forth. And really, ultimately, it's the people on the end who get hurt. And so one of the things this is really trying to do is say, let's have accountability and transparency on both of those, which I feel like regardless of who you are, unless you just want free reign, that's reasonable. Reading through the details, and I won't get into all the details, I felt it was very reasonable what it's looking to put in place for transparency and accountability. And even if you're a tech company who's going, I don't like this whole governance thing, it's what it's asking should be acceptable. You should have some accountability and transparency into what you're doing. You don't just get to go, I'm doing this in a black box, and you don't get to see it. So I appreciated that. Another big area of focus on this is data and privacy. What data and how are you handling it? And where's this data coming from? And how do we know that it's being treated properly and that the data is not being mishandled, or that it's not breached, or that you're getting it from sources that's allowable to hopefully help prevent some of the stuff we see with, well, they stole all this publicly available stuff, and then they go, well, it's publicly available, that's not our fault. And everybody goes, well, I guess, what do we do with that? Because we haven't really had to do this before. And these guidelines get into some of that to say, well, let's have protocols for how data is handled, so that you can't just go, if I can find it on the internet, it's fair game. Well, that's not necessary. Let's at least make sure that that's been validated and vetted, and that this isn't going to blow up later, which again, it seems like, oh, this is slowing things down. Well, not really, because then if we do this right, we don't end up running into these lawsuits when AI music companies are putting out music, and then the artists are going, wait a minute, you train this on all our music? And you think you can get away with it by just going, hey, what it creates isn't technically your music. Well, it sounds 99% like yours. Yeah, but it's 1% different. We can avoid some of this by putting measures in place to oversee some of the data around it. One of the other things I really appreciate is its focus on, are the users consenting to this? If you're scraping this data, you can't just go, well, it's on the internet, so it's fine. No, because that's not an acceptable boundary line. And so let's make sure that people know, and make sure that they have the opportunity to say, no, I don't want my data used for training AI. Let's make that a consistent standard that people have the option to. The other big one is compliance and enforcement. So the three big areas in transparency and accountability, data and privacy, and then the last one is compliance and enforcement. And so really trying to put in some place for, how do regulatory bodies oversee this? Actually having some teeth behind what happens if you don't do this. Because as it stands right now, other than if somebody brings a class action lawsuit against you, there's really nothing you can do. And I don't remember how many months ago it was, but I did a thing where a guy literally, his name was completely tarnished because he was a court reporter who AI then thought he committed all the crimes he reported about. And there was literally nothing he could do when the AI merged them together, and it completely destroyed his career. And it was like, well, sorry, nothing we can do about it. And so by putting in fines and penalties, it hopefully creates some greater accountability to the technology companies to be more careful to make sure things like that don't happen. And if they do, they actually just don't go, well, too bad, so sad, nothing we can do for you, that there actually is accountability on that. And again, I think this doesn't get into a ton of this, but what are some of those best practices around this? I mean, the one thing that's really interesting right now about the AI space is so much of this stuff we haven't had to do before. So there isn't the playbook of, make sure you do this, make sure you've got this in place, make sure you've gone that. And that's why it's been so frustrating to watch every time somebody tries to put some sort of guardrails, people kick them off and go, you're slowing down innovation. It's like, look, good grief. I get we don't want draconian oversight, but we can't just be running wild and free here, even if for the purpose of, let's try and get some best practices in place so that we can make sure everybody's operating in accordance with best practice standards. So, what does this all mean? I think for tech firms, it is going to feel a little restrictive if this goes through, and I think it absolutely will. And I think if it does, it is likely going to start setting the tone elsewhere. And we know this because the EU has historically been, especially around tech, the leader in governance around governing this. So if this moves forward, for sure for tech companies, how they're going to be able to operate in the EU is going to be impacted. And I think given what I read in here, I don't think there's anybody who looks at this and goes, this is ridiculous, we're just throwing it out. I would actually then challenge, what are you doing that you're so concerned about what's in here? Because honestly, I went through the whole thing. I didn't think there was anything that a reasonable person would say, absolutely not. Because the other thing is, if you look at this, it's not getting into the weeds of all the hows and everything. It's laying out some very basic guidance, which I think should be reasonable for everybody. So anyway, but if you're a tech firm, it is going to feel restrictive. And it is going to feel like you're going to have to have some of these regulatory bodies now have visibility and insight into stuff where before you've been able to run free. And so I get there's going to be pushback from the tech firm. If you are a tech leader, I would challenge you, if you are frustrated by this and wanting to push this out, to just say, listen, this is the kind of thing that if you keep putting this off, you're going to get burned in the end. And in some way, it will blow up at you. We cannot run wild and free, completely unrestricted, with no consequences. And the thing is, if you are running an ethical AI company, an ethical tech company, nothing in here should scare you. Nothing in here should make you go, oh. Honestly, the only thing in here that would make somebody be paranoid is if you're doing stuff you shouldn't have been doing, and this is like, oh crap, they're going to find out where the bodies are buried if this moves forward, or we're not going to keep being able to bury the bodies where we buried the bodies. So in some ways, if you do end up reading through this and freaking out a bit, I guess I would challenge you why, because my take on this was there was not anything that should have anyone spooked unless you're doing something that you shouldn't. For businesses on the business side, so let's say you're not in the tech sphere, it is going to have implications for you as well, because this isn't just, oh, the tech providers have all the responsibility. And I actually appreciated that. They actually took the time in here to outline that, I mean, if you're a company, you are using tech. So technically you are a tech company. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of times gets missed is companies have had to kind of go, oh, well, it's on the tech companies to figure this out. These guidelines, again, might feel restrictive if you're a business leader, because if you're using AI products and you're implementing them into how your employees and all this stuff are using them, if you're going, which is a good thing, by the way, this is a good thing. If you've decided to all of a sudden move over to Agental AI and you're automating all these things and you're automating decisions for your company, this is going to outline some practices that would say, maybe not all the time, but at some point, somebody might come in and go, how was that decision made? What technology are you using? How are you making sure that this is being used and run ethically and well in your company? And you won't be able to just go, hey, that's not on us. I don't know, the tech companies made it. Hear no evil, see no evil. It's like, no, this does. Which again, if the sound of that makes you bristle, I would challenge you to say, why? Why is that making you bristle? Is it because a part of you knows that you're pursuing this AI thing in a way that is not in the best interest of your customers or your employees? Because again, take the time to dig through it if you want. If you're running an ethical, thoughtful, discerning organization, this is not unreasonable stuff. It's not. And we could have that debate, and I'm happy to have that debate with folks. But really, going through it, it does not feel burdensome. And to most people, if you're running things well, this will just feel like, yeah, okay, we might have to make a few policy changes. We might have to send out a few reports here and there, but we got nothing to hide. The folks who I think are going to freak out on this are the ones who either haven't been paying any attention and are like, oh my gosh, we actually would have to keep track of this stuff. Like, we've just been running fast and loose. Yeah, you're probably going to have to freak out. Or you're doing stuff that you shouldn't do. Now, for consumers, there are implications, I think, on the consumers as well. I think it's going to be important as consumers, as this kind of stuff moves forward, to know what are your rights? Like, how does this affect you? And be aware of this so that you can call attention if people aren't following it. Because I can tell you right now, there are going to be companies, even though these guidelines are in place, who are going to go, yeah, screw that. I'm not going to follow this. And if you don't know that this is what the rights are, that you don't know these are the guidelines, there's nobody to even call attention to this. And a commissioning body can only do so much to watch all this stuff. As open source as all this stuff is, as much as this is in the wild, it's going to be difficult for them to try and rein this in. So it actually is on us as consumers, when we see bad practices, when we see people operating out of this, to say, hey, this isn't okay. And to raise it to the right people, because there will be actual accountability. So, like I said, to me, this was a really encouraging one. That's why I wanted to open with it. Not only because I think it's really encouraging, but also to help calm people who may see this and be freaking out. And again, I even see consumers on the end where they go, we shouldn't govern anything. Just let the tech be the tech. And what it misses is the tech is not inherently good. And oftentimes neither are the people running it. And so not having anything and assuming it will all work out in the end is a recipe for disaster. And so I'm excited and encouraged by this. I look forward to seeing where it goes. I will continue to keep you updated. But if you do want to actually read it, go check it out. It's on, like I said, you can look up the EU's Commission for the Guidelines of Prohibited Artificial Intelligence Practices. And I think it's called the AI Act or something like that. But even if you go, oh my gosh, I can't read pages and pages and pages of stuff, take the PDF, drop it into your favorite AI tool. I would recommend OpenAI because I think it does the best job of advanced reasoning and not just making things up. But then drop it in and ask it questions. Ask it the questions that matter to you and go, what would be the implications on this? Or what would be the implications on that? It'll help personalize this for you. You don't necessarily need to sit and read it the way somebody who might be directly affected. But I would encourage you to, because again, you have an obligation to know about this stuff, because otherwise you're going to get bamboozled. You are. There's going to be people who are going to violate this left and right. And if you don't know what your rights are, whatever. And I hope that this does move forward. All right. So that's that one. Let's move on to one that might be a little more, you might feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, but just hang with me. All right. So this week again, Elon Musk is all over the news for, there was an article by Wired that came out exposing, and again, exposing Elon Musk and his use of inexperienced engineers who are aiding in the government takeover. Okay, so when you frame things like that, of course, it's going to send people off the roof. And I'll give you what we know so far. And please, if you're listening to this, and even if you're hearing the way I'm describing this right now, I'm getting ready for the messages that are, Christopher, how can you defend that man? All this. I'm not, okay? So just calm down. Calm down. I'm not saying I don't have any issues with what's going on. I think it's fine. Pay no attention. Assume positive. Stop. Quit reading all that into what I'm saying. Okay. I'm just giving you that warning now. Here's what we know. Okay. An investigative journalist dug into who are some of the people involved in this task force that Musk is running, that, are shutting down these different government agencies and all this other stuff. And it comes out that it's a lot of young, inexperienced, basically interns and new career people. And so, yes, it is getting plastered all over the headlines that the hands of our country are in the hands of people who have no idea what they're doing, and democracy is over, and this is the end of the world, and Elon Musk is here. And then on the flip side, now to be fair, because I know there are people who are bristling at me saying that, to be fair, the counter to that I see that is equally frustrating to me are the people that are going, pay no attention to this. This is the best thing ever. The government sucks. Everything's been awful. And this is actually exactly what we need. All right. I've been listening to all sides of this. And folks, first of all, one, the amount of conclusions on both sides that people are jumping to based on almost no information, mind you. Okay. Saying we investigated this and there are young people working on this. Okay. We have their names. Okay. What? Like what? Well, they have access to systems. Yeah. I mean, if they're involved, they would have access to systems. Yeah, but no, this is like real access to systems. Yeah. Yes, I know. Yes, I know. I've worked for large corporations working on highly confidential stuff. And guess what? I have had young people working on things. I have had interns working on things. They have had access to systems to be able to do their work. Okay. So that's all we know. So let's at least be realistic. That's all we know. And the doomsday conclusions are speculation. Now, again, to those of you who want to reach out and punch me in the face right now, I understand the concerns. And to the folks who are dismissing the concerns, you are not helping matters. Okay? There are good reasons to be concerned about what the implications of this are, and I understand that. It feels very much like a lot of very fast, very ill-informed decisions are being made. Sweeping changes are being made. There is right now a lot of attitudes that the way it's always been done is stupid, and we're going to come in and blow it up. And the way it's always been done is not stupid. And honestly, as I watch this one in particular play out, it reminds me a lot of what I see in corporations happen all the time, and it's a changing of the guards. You had the folks that they've been doing it the way they have. It's been working, even though it hasn't been working. And somebody comes in and starts shaking things up, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel good. And the problem is the people coming and shaking things up are looking at the people who've been doing things and are like, you're idiots. Everything you've done is stupid. We're just going to blow it all up and start over. And that's foolish, because there are reasons why things are done the way they are. There are reasons why things are in place the way they are. And to completely disregard that is stupid. It's stupid. On the flip side, it is also, you have to recognize that our resistance to change, when we openly acknowledge things aren't working as well as they could, does not help either. And I've been in organizations where you run into this same thing, where you go, hey, I actually think we might need to think about changing that. We can't change that. And before even hearing like, can we talk about it? It's just absolutely not. I've been here for 30 years and this is how we've always done it. And there's 1,000 reasons why we do it. And these young punk kids, they just are blowing things up. And it's like, well, those young punk kids also have bright ideas. They're not idiots. So let's treat them with respect and let's appreciate the fact that they are looking at this stuff through a lens of, I haven't been doing it for 30 years. So I at least know, why do you do that? Why are we doing that? Isn't there a better way to do that? And when they ask that, you can't bring down the band hammer and say, because that's how you do it. And so I don't want to necessarily sit and focus on, is this task force good or bad? Is this other stuff? I want to bring calm to it because holy cow, in a matter of days, this has turned into like a firestorm. And what I'm watching is more division as two camps of people, both of who I think are out of bounds, lobbing meteors at each other and then wondering why we can't make progress and why this is a mess. So let's calm down. Is there reason to be concerned about this given some of the other factors? Sure. Yes, there is. And I am very interested to know more. And there seems to be a lot of resistance. Going back to the acts I just talked about with the EU AI guidance, there seems to be a lot of resistance and anger for transparency and accountability into what are these task force doing? Who's running them? What are they responsible for? How are they go about making these decisions? Do we have transparency into those decisions? Are we taking into consideration the thoughts of people who don't just think like this? Or are we coming in with a bulldozer? Those are perfectly reasonable questions to ask. And the resistance to that is uncalled for. On the flip side, to simply freak out because somebody that you don't like or you don't agree with is coming in and shaking things up simply because, well, this for sure means this, is also not helpful. And I think we'd make a lot more progress if we could come together and say, all right, I'm really uncomfortable with this. I don't necessarily like it. And the other side can go, I get that. You know what? You're right. You deserve greater transparency and there should be greater accountability into this. And we maybe do need to slow down a little bit. This whole, like, let's rip off as many Band-Aids as we can. Let's slow this down because we're going to end up making some mistakes along the way. Like, acknowledge that. And then on the other side, let's acknowledge, like, you know what? It's not like things have been working really well. And there's a lot of inefficiency and there's a lot of bloat. And we really don't know that it was working before. That's one of the things I see all the time when you go to change is people insist the way they're doing things is fine, but they don't even have any evidence that it is fine. It's like, come on. You can't just go, it's fine and it's fine because that's what we're doing. No, you got to be able to show and defend it from we know it's working for these reasons and these are the measures of success and this is how we know we're achieving that. If you don't have any measures for success and anything you're actually measuring, you can't go, well, what's different is naturally worse because it's different. So, I think the last thing I would add on this is, and I think this is something that whenever I see different sides just feuding against each other, we need to adopt the belief that diverse perspectives are a good thing. And you don't invite diverse perspectives so that you can say they're part of the team when they actually don't have a voice and their voice is never considered. So, on the one side, if you brought in some of the, task force and you gave them the right to, you said, they're fine. We let them in, we let them look around, we let them do stuff, but they actually had no authority or ability to change anything. And you just went back to doing everything, then it was useless. And on the flip side, if you're this task force coming in, a bunch of, whatever, I don't even know who, because again, these might just be people part of a bigger team. I have no idea. We don't know. But let's say it is. Let's say worst case scenario, it's a bunch of Musk's cronies, young punks who are just there to do his bidding. Okay, yeah, it would be just as bad for them to come in and do their thing and say, yeah, fine, we'll listen to what you guys have to say. Yeah, but we're not going to do anything with it. We're just going to do what we were tasked to do. That would be equally wrong. I think we need to get better at saying, you know what, we need these different perspectives. They add value and they need to be considered seriously. And if we had more of that, I think we would see less of this just chaos that we're seeing. Okay, there you go. I'll let you know if I find out more, and you can send me the angry messages and tell me I'll get it from both sides. I already know that. I already know, based on what I just said, I'm going to hear it from the folks that think Musk is going to save the world, and I'm going to hear it from the folks who think Musk is going to kill us all. So I'm ready for him. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, this one should in no way be controversial. Well, maybe it will. We'll see. OpenAI has had some major releases in the last week or so. I mean, they came out with 3.0, which is their latest frontier model. This is Omni 3, advanced reasoning. The benchmarks for it are impressive. I'm really interested to see where the safety data comes in on this, but I guess, that's a conversation for another day. I'm sure I will have an update on that. But because this advanced reasoning model is now out, some of the implications of that reasoning model, and that's why I lumped these together, because I technically could have had OpenAI's operator, OpenAI 3.0, and OpenAI deep research as three separate things. But I actually wanted to give people context to it, because you might be like, oh my gosh, so much is changing. There's all this stuff changing at once. And it's like, actually not really. Actually not really. So at the highest level, 3.0 is released, which is the latest advanced reasoning model, which basically means it's better at doing complex reasoning and double checking itself. And it's supposed to reduce hallucinations, which I don't like to call hallucinations. It's not like it's making things up, but essentially it's got a more advanced reasoning model. So naturally, okay, and this advanced reasoning model not only can do advanced reasoning, it's also capable of more omni-level AI activity, such as it's multimodal. It's more capable of multimodal activities, which means it can do different things instead of just, I am trained to do the one thing. It's like, well, I can do this and I can do this and I can do that. And so what you see with that is you see things spinning off of that. So operator is one of those things where if you haven't played around with operator, I can't remember if you, I think you have to have the pro to use operator. With stuff. You can do tasks with just the plus. You have to have pro, which is the $200 a month one, I think, to get operator and deep research, which I'll talk about them. Anyway, but essentially what it does is operator and deep research are designed to be more agental AI for things, so that now you can actually have AI doing more activity for you instead of just being kind of this like prompt assistant for you. So with operator, you can actually build AI agents off of it that you can have it, go do this, not deep research is another thing. But, let's say you want to have it set up a bunch of stuff, go do this stuff in the web. And then I want you to go build this and I want you to then bring it back. And I want you to take care of all these other things. I actually haven't had the chance to play around with operator much yet. But I've seen some of the videos on what it can do and all of this stuff. And I mean, it's pretty neat. It gives you an idea of, how agents can work. Now, the funny part about it, because I'll have to do an update on agental AI probably next week or something like that. But one of the funny parts about operator is, I think what we're going to see with agental AI in general is it was like heralded as, now you've got your AI agent. Everybody's got an AI agent in their home that they can use for whatever they want. You want an agent to do this, you just build your own agent. And very quickly already the feedback is coming in that it's like, well, wait a minute, this is actually like a nightmare because it makes a ton of mistakes. And I'm spending more time cleaning up its mess than if I just did it myself. And I'm going, duh. Like, this is what I've been saying about agents forever. If you just throw an agent at something and go, I basically gave it, a general gist of what it's supposed to do, it's going to blow it up and it doesn't work super well. And it's fine if it's extremely repeatable and consistent, but if it's not, it makes a big mess. And so I think one of the things that's encouraging is with operators specifically, people are suddenly starting to get a firsthand look at, oh yeah, these agents, like they kind of make a mess if you're not really, really intentional. And they actually still require people to do stuff, which I think is going to shift some of the stuff. I probably got to stop because I'm going to get too much into the agent stuff. But it's starting to make the realities of agental AI, people are becoming more keenly aware of their limitations. Let's just put it that way. And I'll talk more about it there. But Operator is out now. So more and more people are getting their hands on AI agents and what they're capable of and what they're not capable of. But that's all coming off the heels of this 3.0 release, because obviously, if you have an agent doing more advanced things and doing different things, you need a more advanced model. And so 3.0 is powering that. Now, the other one that just came out is deep research, which in my opinion is a custom trained agent. So Operator gives you the flexibility to build your own agent. Deep research is a new thing coming off of OpenAI that is kind of like, hey, we've pre-built an operator for you that is designed to do, well, I mean, come on, the name should tell you this, like deep research. So if you want it to do a deep research report, something that you might have a data analyst do, you can now have it do it, and its accuracy, the depth of what it gets into, how it's prioritizing, what data to consider, what not, and then actually putting it together. It's specific for that. Now, what's interesting about that is, of course, people are going, oh my gosh, this is the end of the data analyst job. Now deep research is out and this is the end of people doing this work. I'll talk more about agental AI probably next week. But even with deep research, as I was watching it, like I watched many tutorials on some of these things, is how it works. And I'm like, yeah, it's super cool. It honestly is super cool. If you are in the science world or the finance world or, the policy world, I mean, this thing could save you countless hours. But I don't see why people are going, oh my gosh, this is just going to get rid of people's jobs. Because I was watching it, I'm watching the person go through this and I'm like, yeah, the agent is doing a lot of the legwork, but I mean, good grief. It's not autonomous like people frame this up. Like people are like, oh yeah, now the chief research officers they aren't going to need any data analysts. They're just going to say, I'm just going to sit behind my desk and do these research things myself. It's like, are you kidding? Like, you don't know how jobs work if that's what you think this is going to happen. Like, the chief research officer does not have the time to sit and do that. That's why they have teams of people who historically have done this. And even the people going, well, this is the end of the data analyst job. No, it's not. The director of research, the research manager is still going to be like, I am overseeing this other stuff. I need my people doing this. Where it's really going to help is, I think back to a lot of the friends I've had that got mixed into big consulting early in their career. Their jobs sucked. Honestly, their jobs were terrible because they would have these big clients, had these big demands. Their bosses needed them to do all this stuff. And these poor research, these poor consulting analysts, fresh out of college, are being told, get this, get that, go do this, go do that. And they're spending nights, weekends, everything doing this work. And now their job still exists. It's just, they might not have to spend their nights and weekends doing it. Like, now they're just going to have an AI agent that's going to help them bring it together and pull it together in a certain way. They're still going to need direction from their leaders. They're still going to need to ask the right questions to make sure they're getting it. Lord knows you're still going to want to make sure you proof this stuff. Like, I get people are like, oh, these advanced reasoning models, it's just smarter than a human. Yeah, well, even the smartest humans make mistakes, and that's proven true with these AI models. So, anyway, all that to say, it's pretty neat what's coming out with 3.0. You actually, even if you're a Plus member, I don't think it's available for free accounts yet, but you can access O3 Mini and High now. So if you want to play around with it, and I've played around with it from some of the research stuff, even if you don't have deep research, using the O3 model to do some of the work, it's actually pretty powerful. So anyway, I'm impressed, but like I said, I'll talk more about the agental side of it maybe next week or something like that. So, but a lot happening with OpenAI. Now, it's not completely unique to OpenAI. Deep Research, Google has its own research assistant. Operator, OpenAI is not the only one building agents. So it's not like this is, oh my gosh, this is the first that's coming out. But OpenAI has had some really powerful advancements. And my reason for sharing the context of how these three together come out is now that 3.0 is out, we're likely going to see more advanced reasoning models come, which is only going to further fuel these agents and things like deep research and all this other stuff, which is why I'll talk more about, we're saying 2025 is the year of agental AI. I'll talk about what that might mean and what we can expect out of that, just not today. Okay, fourth and last, especially with time, I came across this thing that's talking about the rise of physical AI and what that means. I want to give some clarity with this because I do agree that this is what we're going to start seeing, and it actually ties to my previous point in an unexpected way. Because when people hear physical AI, they immediately jump to robots, humanoid robots walking around doing stuff, which in some ways, yes, could be that, not necessarily. But let's talk about what this is, because what this article was talking about in Forbes, that I do agree, this next generation where we're going to go is it's very much going to move into, I don't necessarily even like to call it physical AI so much as contextual AI. In that I think contextual AI gives a better portrait of what we're talking about here. Because when we say physical AI, it actually means contextual AI. And I guess the best way I can illustrate this is right now we're in like the academic AI world, where if you work with AI, it's like talking to a very tenured business professor who actually has never spent a day in the corporate world. They can tell you how it's supposed to work. They can tell you the theories. They can tell you in practice, or they can tell you, academically how strategy is supposed to work. They can show you how to do a SWOT analysis. It can do all this, but it's never actually done any of it. And we all know how that breaks down very quickly when you have somebody go, well, how it works is it's like this. And if they're talking to a group of people who have actually gotten their teeth kicked in, they sit there and go, oh, really? That's how it works? Thank you. Thank you for that. And a good example I saw illustrated of this is if you ask AI to explain how, a rubber ball will respond if you drop it and give the reasons why. It can explain to you how gravity works and what you might expect to see. But if you read its response, you'll very quickly go, yeah, that's technically correct. But in practice, that's not really how it works, type of a thing. Versus a person who's been a child and ever played with a bouncy ball knows that, if I drop a ball, there's a whole realm, a spectrum of things. And so as a result, we have context. And so when we drop a bouncy ball and it does something unexpected, we know what to do because we're like, yeah, we've seen this a million. We didn't specifically ever see that outcome, but we've seen enough to know that when that happens, we go this way. And I know the bouncy ball may be a way oversimplification of this, but that's what we're dealing with AI right now. It knows a lot and it knows nothing. It knows all the book smarts, and yet it has zero context to what it does, which is why you get some of these that's what you think you should do, which is a huge limitation for AI. Which is why the next push for all of this is going to be to move into the physical or contextual AI world. Now, like I said, when people hear this, they immediately have the Terminator pop into their head. They're like, aha, that's why we're having, so much advancements in humanoid robots. And in some ways it's like, yes, that is true. And that is part of the reason why there is so much happening, because the more of these physical robots we have in the world, the more they understand, yeah, I know what it's like to walk up a hill because I've walked up a hill before. I've actually done this. But it's not limited to just physical robots. And that's why I prefer calling it contextual AI. Part of this big boom of operators is to advance contextual AI. Because right now we have a bunch of chatbots who can tell you what you should do, but it's never actually done it. As we create operators, as we create agents, it will have actually done some of these things now. Instead of just saying, how should I build a website? Well, it will have built a bunch of websites. It will have run into some of those problems. The deep learning will have had to kind of do its own thinking because it runs into its own problems and it has to solve it. And it will further optimize the AI, which is why there's such a push. Now, I think there's another factor driving this, which is we've basically sucked up all the data in the world to feed these things. There's only so much book learning it can do, and it's kind of done it all. And so now there's this big push to say, well, now how do we actually do contextual training? How do we actually train it on context? Which is why agents right now are the big push for anything digital. How can we have it doing all these tasks? How can we have it making decisions? How can we have it running these workflows so that it's not just knowing based on what it's been trained on academically, but what it's actually done? That's also why we're seeing such a big push for physical AI robots, where it actually can do some of this. Now, what does this all mean? I think it's a little early to tell. I think there's a lot of folks who will say, this is what's going to make AI smarter than human beings, because once it has context, it will be able to just do everything like we do. I personally don't think that's the case. Do I think the models are going to become more advanced? Yes. Do I think they're going to become more capable? Yes. Do I think it's going to radically change as we move into the world of contextual AI? Going back to if you don't think AI is going to be disruptive yet, just wait till contextual AI starts taking off. And while we can point fingers and laugh at all these agents doing stupid stuff and making messes, just wait till it starts learning and starts correcting from itself and starts having context. Just wait and watch how much disruption is coming on the heels of that. Now, I don't say that to freak people out. I'm saying that because if you still are not of the mindset that this is going to radically change things, you need to be. You need to be. And I do agree with the assessment of this, that this is where things are. It already is. Like the article I was reading was saying, like, this is where it's going. Like, it's where it's going. It's already there. Like, we're going there right now. It's why this year everybody in the tech industry is trying to shove agents down your throat. Like, there's a reason behind this. Like, there's a reason they want to democratize agents so that everybody's like, hey, make an agent for this, make an agent for that. Don't buy your groceries. Have your agent buy your groceries. Like, they want everybody to automate everything, because the more things we automate, the more the AI can gain context. Am I saying that's good or bad? I think it could go both ways. I really do. And so it's less of a, well, what's your, do we stop it? Do we enable it? It's like, well, you can't stop it, but you need to be aware of it. And again, it just goes back to the kind of change and disruption we're going to see. So I'll talk more about agents. Probably I'll add it to the list next week. Those are the big four I wanted to cover this week. I hope, as always, you found this helpful. And thanks for listening, watching. I will see you on the other side.